Hello everybody and welcome to another Doctor Who review. This time I'm actually going back to a review I've done before, the Daleks Master Plan. And the reason I'm doing this, if you have been in the dark or not known what's happened, there have been two recovered episodes from this story found more recently in a private collection. They have been returned to the BBC archives and they were released for public view in the UK on the 3rd of April 2026. It has made a couple of changes to my thoughts and feelings on the story, so this is going to be a mix of the original review from 2024 and some elements I want to plug in from now to add into the review. As always, I have with me for the classic TV series reviews the television companion. Let's have a look at the plotline for this story. The TARDIS materialises on Kemble. There, the Doctor and his friends meet Space Security Service agent Brett Vian, who has been sent in search of Mark Corey. Learning of the Daleks' scheme, which hinges on the use of a weapon called the Time Destructor, they determine to warn the authorities on Earth. This proves problematic, as the human leader Malik Chen, Guardian of the Solar System, is a traitor in league with the Daleks. Fortunately, the Doctor has managed to make off with the Terranium core of the Time Destructor, disrupting the Daleks' plans. In one of a number of attempts to regain the Terranium, Chen dispatches Space Security Service agent Sarah Kingdom to track down the Doctor's party. Sarah, unaware of Chen's treachery, kills Brett, her own brother, before the time travellers can convince her of the truth. She then joins forces with them, and after an encounter with their old adversary the Monk, they all arrive back on Kemble. There, the Doctor contrives to steal the Time Destructor and turn it against the Daleks, annihilating them. Sarah has ignored his instruction to return to the TARDIS, however, and she too is killed. There we are, the fourth story of Season 3 of Doctor Who, starring William Hartnell as the First Doctor, Peter Purves as Stephen Taylor. Then we have Adrienne Hill, who initially starts the story as Katarina and ends with Jean Marsh playing Sarah Kingdom. We also have an appearances from Kevin Stoney, his first appearance in Doctor Who, not his most memorable, but his first appearance playing Mavik Chen. We have the Daleks, once again, in one of their longest adventures ever. In fact, it is their longest adventure ever. And we also have the first appearance of Nicholas Courtney, playing a character called Brett Vian. Let's go through the characters, let's go through some of the main characters. There's so many characters here, I'm just going to keep to some of the main players in this. We start with the Doctor, played of course by William Hartnell. This is a good mix of what the First Doctor has become. This crotchety man with this frustration of his friends disobeying him and his protection of them really comes through here. It's a nice little story for that, and I quite like the way that Hartnell has put himself across in this story, and it actually shows all the facets of Hartnell's developed over the time, the crotchetiness, the grumpiness, the protectionism, the mischievous bits. There's a few mischievous bits. The way he does the Terranium, takes over one of the delegates of the council, is interesting, and the council is an interesting concept overall. It's set up in Dalek Cutaway was the original story, Mission to the Unknown. Dalek Cutaway is what it was called originally, but Mission to the Unknown is the actual episode, and that is the precursor of the Council, and you see more of the Council there, and you really need to watch Mission to the Unknown to understand the Space Security Force, the delegates, and how they all come to play as part of the plan, because the Time Destructor is the Daleks pulling together all these different empires across the universe to bring them together, and the Doctor then coming in and disrupting that and taking the Terranium away is quite fun. His mischievousness really works with the Monk, because the Monk is trying to get revenge, and I'll go into that in more detail here, and the things he does to play with the Monk's perceptions and outwits him is quite nice, and I quite like that. Overall, Hartnell's quite good to watch in this one. There's elements of his illness coming in a little bit, where he does flub a couple of his lines, but I think he's got a good crutch in Stephen, in the way Peter Purves works with him, and I think it's a nice little duo between the two of them, and I think it kind of highlights and heightens the Doctor as a better character, because he's got somebody like Stephen he can rely on to lean on. someone like Peter Purves to lean on when it comes to the characterization and the story itself, which is really quite nice. We then have Stephen Taylor, very protective of the Doctor. He's not quite an Ian Chesterton mould, but he is in that kind of thought process, I think is probably the way of doing it. He's not as quite as action as Ian is. He's a cross between Jamie McCrimmon later on and Ian in regards to the characterization. It just shows how the development is. I like Stephen. I think Stephen's a great character. He's very protective of Katerina once he gets over his poisoning at the beginning of the story. And he likes Sarah. He's trying to control Sarah because Sarah's got a brain of her own and a mind of her own, being a security agent, which is quite nice. And I quite like the way that Peter Purves portrays Stephen. It's quite a nice little role overall, and it's a nice development on here. I don't think Stephen gets too much to do, and I think they will start, as I say, still trying to do a kind of mould of Ian a little bit in some respects. Ian was interesting because he was a bit older and a bit more mature. Stephen's obviously a younger man and is a bit more testosterone, a bit more wanting to go in there and protect the Doctor and do all the stuff he needs to do to be the big muscle, and it doesn't quite work sometimes. It's a bit off. We then got Brett Vian, who is the first 4 episodes, obviously a soldier with a good heart, but he is a bit suspicious, and obviously he plays on the base security patrolman's role, the soldier, quite well. The whole fact that he's on Kemble initially to try and find his friend Mark Corey, and then one of his other friends gets destroyed by the Daleks, and that famous scene that you probably know about where Brian Cant is playing the character who's wandering through Kemble's forest trying not to get done by the Varga plants, who don't seem to be about that much in the Kemble. It's interesting. The Varga was quite an interesting character that was portrayed in Mission Unknown. They've kind of disappeared. It's Kemble. We know they're there and they are a threat, but they're not really included in this one. And then we've got Byron, who initially distrusts them, but has got a heart of gold because he helps with the anti-poison that Stephen needs to make him feel better. And they become part of the crew trying to stop the Terranium from being taken. One additional thing I would say about Brett Vian from my original review back in 2024 is that we get to see a lot more of Nicholas Courtney's performance. We only had one instance of his performance from episode 2 before. Now we have his appearance in the first 3 episodes, and we can see why Nick Courtney is seen as such a great actor and why he would have been used by Camfield again later on in the Weather Fear and then obviously the Invasion, and then became a regular from Spearhead from Space, because he's just got that kind of acting chops and that sort of presence on screen. He's willing to be in the background a little bit and doesn't overpower the main 3. He does show a very good side and a very human side to the Space Patrol, and it actually works in that respect. So it's a really measured performance from Nicholas Courtney and proves why he is one of the favourite actors of Doctor Who and why he works so well as a Brigadier, because you can see his acting chops here as much as you can as the Brigadier. And he then gets brutally shot by his sister, Sarah Kingdom, which is an interesting character. Sarah is quite good. She's kind of like a Emma Peel-esque character. There is the standard characterizations of companions in this time where she's a little bit fooled by Mavic Chen. Initially thinks she's there to stop the travellers, but then ends up going on their side and going with them. It's quite interesting how that all works out. There is a good action sequence when she's fighting with the Egyptians in episode 9. I think it's quite fun. It shows that Emma Peel sort of idea, and I think I get the Emma Peel idea because she's in a kind of cat suit all the way through this costume she's got, very much like the Emma Peel of the Avengers type of idea. Certainly has a mind of her own, certainly wants to try and help the Doctor a bit more near the end, and that is her comeuppance when she gets killed. And Jean Marsh does a good job here. I think it's a nice little characterization. I'm going to completely redo Katerina because the whole perception of Katerina has changed because of the situation with the new episodes we've got. You don't really get much of Katerina and what she's like in episode 2, but you get a lot more about Katerina and the way Adrian Hill plays her in episodes 1 and 3. I did say she was fairly ineffectual, and that is still true to an extent, but I think it's more the fact because the way it's played, and you see a lot more of that in episodes 1 and 3, is she's got a lot more wonder and naivety about her, and it really is played in such a way that, you know, you can see the contrast between what the Doctor how the Doctor treats Stephen and how the Doctor treats Katerina, and it's nice that it's a nice little contrast between them. It's such a shame, though, that they didn't think they could creatively progress Katerina because of the nature of where she came from. She's so out of time, and it's a shame, because I think Adrian Hill would have done well if they'd given her more time to actually develop. The best bit I noticed was when they were talking about Katerina, how she just gets on with things when the Doctor makes that comment. In the reconstruction, you don't see what she's doing at that point. You just see a kind of still picture of her looking. But what she's actually doing at this point, which we find in episode 3, is she's actually reaching out to the window and actually looking in amazement out the stars, out the window of the spaceship. And that's a really nice touch, and really would makes it more impactful than what it already was when she does get sucked out by the Desperous inmate in episode 4, and that is one of the most brutal deaths you get. It really is. Katerina set the standard for companion deaths, but also you built up so much a love to like her. I think it's a bit more impactful now with that death in episode 4 than what it was before, because of the way Adrian Hill has played it. So in that respect, it actually is a better performance than what I initially thought. We then have Kevin Stoney playing Mavic Chen. Do you know what? You can see why he was brought back later. The scheming, self-serving character who is a lust for power really works in this story, and I think it's really a nice little turn by Kevin Stoney in this. Additional things with Mavic Chen. I did mention, obviously, in the last one, it was a bit difficult to say how much the character of Mavic Chen works as an enemy. You can hear the gravitas of the character in the reconstructions, but you don't really see the gravitas and the scheming nature of him as much. Well, what you can see is the big bad nature that he has. The whole bit when he comes in and starts giving tribute with this side to side bowing is quite interesting. The bit where Zephon, one of the Galaxy 5 leader, gets exterminated, Mavic Chen's right in that. You don't see that in reconstruction, but he's right within the Daleks talking and chastising him. And he actually has to walk out the way, and he walks out the way in such a disdain and such a, okay, this is not my part, I'll just go in the corner and just look at some screens, while the Daleks shoot Zephon at point blank range. It really just shows the contempt that this character has, and Kevin Stoney proves why he came back for the invasion, and why I think, he's a great actor in that respect, and it works. And yes, there is the blackface, we know that. But do you know what? I think the character kind of overstates that and makes it work for me, and it really does work for me in that respect. We then got the Daleks. They are peak of pomp. They're not being silly run around chase like the chase was in the previous season. This is a lot more the scheming, planning Daleks you see in earlier stories. It does work seeing the Daleks like this. I think because the Recon is able to animate the Daleks a bit more, you do get a bit better sense of them. But they are very scheming, they are planning, they're very suspicious of Chen, quite rightly, and they do play the delegates off each other a bit as well when it comes to the delegates of the Great Galactic thing. To bring all the bits together for the Time Destructor is an interesting setup. There's a bit more with the Daleks and their evilness and the way they're plotting and scheming through the movement and direction, especially in episodes 1 and 3. You see a bit of the little camera angles with the clip that was surviving of Vian's companion that gets exterminated by the Daleks in the first episode with the low shots. But there's a constant movement with the Daleks are talking. They're not all static all the time. The camera's always moving to give this kind of sense of urgency and a bit of uncomfortableness about what's happening, because the Daleks sometimes, when the director, can be very static shots and they're just lights blinking, talk to each other, which kind of makes it a bit boring sometimes. But Douglas Camfield's tried to make them more menacing with this constant movement that's going on with the camera work. We then have Peter Butterworth back as the monk. Nice 3 episodes with him. Very much a continuation of the character from the Time Meddler. Very much up for revenge. Very scheming. He's more of a comedy character, comedic relief. It's interesting how he's kept the monk costume, though. I would have thought maybe because obviously the monk was like a fictitious character they used for the Time Meddler, that they would have maybe put him in a different costume. And maybe there's that kind of audience recognition having the monk in the monk's habit. But you can see the monk maybe not being the monk in a different costume, and it would still work with the character because Butterworth does work well. And it's a nice little 3-episode run for him, maybe slightly wasted with some of the machinations, maybe putting them in and mixed it up too much, but it was nice to see him, and it was a nice way of doing things. When it comes to the writing, Terry Nation and Dennis Spooner kind of share the honours here, and it's well directed by Douglas Camfield to help with that. You do get a sense Douglas Camfield can direct and does direct more than just the 4-camera setup. Anything that's done in Ealing or filmed in Ealing, he does utilise camera shots a lot better. I think there was quite a bit done in Ealing with the filming stuff. I think some of the Kemble scenes were done in Ealing, which work well the way they're directed because the cameras are in different positions and different close-ups. There's a lot of emotive use here of the camera. But what we do get, it's quite an enjoyable, well-directed, tightly directed. The characters know what they're doing, and it's quite nicely done. One thing that was noticeable in the recovered episodes was Hartnell's wig, the first Doctor's wig. It's over the place at various points. There's multiple occasions in episode 1 and 3 where the wig is in really odd shape all over the place. It seems to have got frustrated when he's went through the jungle in episode 1, and then episode 3 once he takes the cover off from Zephon's dress, and the black balaclava he had on to cover his face. That is also the hairs all over the place. And there's actually a scene where you can actually see Peter Purves trying to motion to William Hartnell to sort his hair out, which he eventually does smooth out. And that's actually quite a nice little touch. But it just shows the production concerns you have at the time, and the fact you could only record and you can't re-record it again. It just shows it's an added layer to the charm of the story. Tristan Kerem is just basically doing musical nods, and highlights the action. He doesn't really have any sort of score on here. It's not the sort of thing you do in these days, and it's interesting seeing that. So, there's a few bits in this story. There's quite a lot in this story. Dennis Spooner does a good job to carry on Terry Nation's idea when Terry Nation's not writing the episodes, because he writes 6 of them, Spooner writes 6 of them. But Spooner's got a little bit more comedy in it, I think, and a little bit more of the mischievous, fun First Doctor that we see. That's especially apparent when the monk gets involved in the action in episodes 8 to 10. This main part of the story is effectively a chase for 8 episodes of the Doctor taking the Terranium, the Daleks and Chen chasing him, bumping into different scrapes along the way, getting particle disseminated, dimensionally disseminated over to Myra at one point, and then having to get over to Kemble and back and forth, and this kind of chase between Earth, Kemble, Myra, Desperus. It's quite an epic adventure in that respect, but at the end of the day, it's still the case of they're on the run, they're trying to stop the Terranium from being taken over because it's such a big part of this time destructor that will destroy all of time that the Daleks have built. This idea the Terranium comes from the solar system, comes from Uranus. It's said a different way in the story, but I'm going to say Uranus to be polite. And the whole plot and back and forth is basically a back and forth for 8 episodes, apart from Feast of Stephen in the middle. So it's basically episodes 2 to 6 and then 8 to 10 with the time destructor. The thing with Classic Who is there tends to be a good first act. The second act can be a little bit baggy and a bit of back and forth padding, and then you've got a good third act. That's how the classic series stories work. This is multiplied by 3 in this story because you've got effectively the first 2 episodes are great setup. You've then got 6 or 7 episodes of padding, and then you've got the final 3 or 4, the 2 or 3, that actually set up the third act. And it's an interesting way of trying to expand it out and trying to get the whole story working on a kind of longer basis. It's an epic story. It took me 4 evenings to watch, because I haven't watched it in all one go, because it's mostly reconstruction, which is what I've watched it as. I've only watched the reconstruction and the clips that are part of that reconstruction. I think, to be fair, episodes 1 to 3 are now more coherent because you've got all of them, and it makes it exciting to watch, and it's actually quite fun to watch because because it was disjointed episodes before. You went into reconstruction, then you went into an episode that was arrayable, then you went back into reconstruction, and then it kind of jarred a little bit. The fact that we now have another 2 episodes and there's 5 of the 12 now surviving is actually really nice, and I quite like the way that's come about. And I think it helps enhance the story's reputation. And it's very much like in Enemy of the World, about the fact that there's a different point of view coming across. Although Master Plan probably has more to it that makes you appreciate it as an audio story. The whole idea of Salamander in Enemy of the World and Patrick Troughton's performance doesn't come across in audio. It's very similar to Adrian Hill's performance of Katerina, which doesn't come across in audio. You need the visual, and this is another example of why missing episodes are so enlightening when they come about, because you see a different side to the character that you wouldn't necessarily get from an audio recording, and it's really nice to have that idea of the recovery. I hope there's more. I hope there's more recovered episodes as time goes on. I really hope it goes down from the 95 we have now to even less. You've got 4 episodes where you've got recons, and they can be hard going sometimes to go through, especially in a story like this. I think there's enough in it with the way they do the reconstructions to make it still enjoyable, but it's not something you can watch as a binge watch in the one go with the recons because of the nature of the story. You do need a bit more of the action. It's a bit of a shame. Other bits of it, we've got the Vizians, who are like these invisible big creatures that attack the Daleks on Myra. That's interesting. The famous line, "I'm afraid, my friends, that the Daleks have won," at the end of episode 5, which I think is quite interesting. The whole contrivance of the gravity field they use to charge the fake terranium that Stephen then gets put into this force field, which effectively protects him when the Daleks try and exterminate him at the end of episode 6. And then the whole thing with the monk and the monk trying to get revenge of the Doctor from episode 8 through till 10, and the whole play of being an ancient Egypt and the whole back and forth of that. That's quite entertaining. The monk trying to be his slimy way already, and I've already done the Time Meddler, so you know what I like. You know I like the monk in that respect. And there's quite a bit of back and forth and jumping about. But with nation stuff, it's very nice political commentary in the very first episode with space security control. One interesting thing I've noticed when I was looking at the good bits and bad bits for the story for the new 2 episodes was the scene where Mavic Jen's given his press conference on the television screen, and you've got you've got 2 of the characters watching this, one who's very enamoured about Mavic Jen and one who's maybe a bit more cynical about him. And what you don't catch on, obviously, reconstructions, because you wouldn't necessarily know that, is the fact of the fact that he is mouthing some of the repeated words that Mavic Jen has said multiple speeches before, to show his kind of cynicism and his disdain for Mavic Chen, which is really quite an interesting little directorial addition that you have there. It's a nice way of setting up Chen as this person who's seen by the people of Earth as such a important part of the security of the system, and he's well liked. And then we see this turn with Chen, which helps justify his manic personality, his evilness, and his self-serving ideals, and his lust for power. And I think it's a nice little way of setting him up. I will go on to the Feast of Stephen. It is the first Christmas Day episode of Doctor Who. There wouldn't be another one for another 40 years with the Christmas invasion. This one is basically them taking some steam off, having some fun. The whole police station interrogation thing of the first 10 minutes is nonsensical and silly. I think there's a lot more fun in the film sets, in the 1920s film sets, the silent film sets, so they go through in the film studio. That's quite fun, and I quite like the romp of that. It's certainly a take it or leave it, take your brain out part of the story, and does bring it down a little bit overall for my rating. But it's there, and it's something I don't think we'll ever recover, because I don't think it was really sold that much to other countries, so if we've lost it, we've lost it. I think we might get the rest of Master Plan at some point. Probably will be animated at some point. They are starting to do these sort of things with longer stories, so it may be very possible they will animate it more. But it's an interesting interregnum, I think is probably the best way of putting it. You could ignore it and it doesn't affect the rest of the story, and it's fun for what it is, but does it make any difference to the plot? Not really. It's a runaway bit, and it's like a pause in the proceedings. You don't want something brutal on Christmas Day. Volcano, the following episode's a little bit light-hearted as well with the monk, and I think that's probably why the monk was brought in a little bit. But it's quite fun. It's interesting enough. Overall, I don't mind this story. It's okay. It's enjoyable watch enough, but you can't really watch it in a bulk without the visuals. and it does drag it down a little bit. It could be a few episodes less and it would still be a good solid story. I know why they were doing that, trying to eke out more of the Dalek mania, but it was starting to wane by this point. But overall, I would give this a rating of 3 TARDISes out of 5. Okay, let's see how that story stacks up with the rest of the William Hartnell era and how it stacks up with the rest of the TV stories overall. So the Daleks Master Plan still sits at the bottom of the William Hartnell era, with 3 TARDISes out of 5 sharing that accolade with the Crusade. At the top are 2 stories with 4 TARDISes out of 5. They are An Unearthly Child and The Time Meddler. Overall, there are still 3 stories at the bottom rated 2.5 TARDISes out of 5. They are, of course, Time Lash, Sleep No More and Warriors of the Deep. And at the top, there are 7 stories still with 4.5 TARDISes out of 5. They are The Happiness Patrol, Inferno, The Day of the Doctor, The Caves of Androzani, The Tomb of the Cybermen, Dalek, and The End of Time. That's it for this Redux review of the Daleks Master Plan. Yeah, a few elements I wanted to add in there, not much, it's mostly the original review. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts of the Dalek Master Plan before and after the recovered episodes. Leave a comment down below. Do you like it? Leave a comment down below. Are you not so keen? Leave a comment down below. I have done multiple First Doctor reviews, as you can see from the ratings. If you want to check them out, they're up in the top right hand corner here of the video or in the description down below. Also, my recommendation would be maybe to check out The Time Meddler, which is the one that also includes the meddling monk. If you like this video, please like it and share it with the hashtag teamstructor, and also hit that subscribe button and the notifications bell so you know when a new video comes out. General new video every second Sunday at 4 PM GMT. The next review is Colony in Space, and that's in 2 weeks' time, and I shall see you then. Until then, guys, thanks so much for watching. See you later.